I don't know if you ever knew this, Dennis. When I worked for AT&T back in the 90s, I had uh, kind of this experience of when, uh, I started there, we were working in the office. And just like anything back in those days, we had to go in 5 days a week. And so it wasn't anything unusual. But along the way, they made this initiative for us to get out. They kicked us out of the office, which was really kind of disconcerting for me, right?
Yeah.
And and I remember my boss telling me, because I kept coming back in, hard habits to break, right?
Hmm.
And he said, "You need to get out of the office, just work from home." And it was really, I was a little bit, I have to say, a little bit frightened about the idea of doing that. But certainly after a while, it didn't take that long. I really enjoyed working from home. But today's environment is completely different.
Yeah. Now it's like trying to get them back is a challenge. I mean, you know, you and I live in the world. We both work from home, and it's like
Hmm.
if you told me I had to go back into an office 5 days a
Oh
week,
gosh.
that would be a hard one for me.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten used to this environment that I've created here. It's chaos behind me right now because we moved, um, but then there's others that if you have small children or you don't have that workspace where you live, the office still may be a good option for you. But I think the world we've gone, from one extreme to the other, and the pendulum is kind of going back the other way. But I still think you and I've talked about this before. I think the hybrid model is still the best. I mean,
Hmm.
because anytime you can give employees some control or freedom of their time, it just makes them more productive. I mean, I still will advocate that working from home is more productive for most people
Hmm.
if they, you've got to, if you're not a good worker or you're sloppy, you're going to be sloppy at home or in the office. But
Yep.
if you're truly trying to get your work done and be productive and you've got the right environment, you can make it so much more productive at home. But there's also reasons why people want to go in. And our guest today, Vitaly Stockman with DeskMe.com, is joining us to talk about this trend of what's going on. And they actually have a tool that he shares in the podcast that I think you're going to find really, really interesting because it kind of makes that hybrid model even more powerful to understand what's going on.
It's really the culmination of what's been going on. Like Dennis said, we've gone from the extremes, from going into work 5 days a week to working from home to settling in the middle, because there is a nice combination where, hey, yeah, I still want to be able to work from home, but I do need to meet with my team. We are going to have a sprint. We do need to have this presentation that we're putting together. And while online web calls are great, they can't take the place of the interaction we have in a face-to-face environment. So I think
Yeah.
this is a really interesting tool. So let's take a listen to what Vitaly says about today's environment and what we're looking at going in the future.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
Dennis, when we start thinking a little bit about the dynamics of office work, now a lot of the things that you and I have to deal with for the last, decade or two, we've worked from home. We really, we've done our startups, and we feel really comfortable at home. But for a lot of our peers, a lot of people who, we endured COVID and we had to modify the way we worked. We weren't given a choice. We had to be able to kind of adapt, and that really changed the dynamic of the everyday commute and work.
It changed the life for all of us. And
Uh-huh.
some maybe didn't like it, but I think a lot of people liked the work at home model because it gave them that flexibility and freedom of all those things that you don't like going in the office about, the
Uh-huh.
drive, the commute, the, what do you do for lunch? Where do you go? All that kind of stuff. There's some positives about going in, don't get me wrong, but there's also some negatives that, have created some challenges. And so now we're, 5 years after COVID and things are kind of shifting back. There's several companies in Nashville that are requiring everybody to come in every day. That to me is a shock. That's kind of a challenge that it's like, okay, it, once you taste freedom or flexibility, it's kind of hard to go back, is my
Can't put
mindset.
that toothpaste back in the tube. So
It's no kidding.
that's right. So we have an expert with us today. And so Vitaly, thank you for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
So talk to us, Vitaly, about, you know, Dennis and I have talked a number of times in the podcast about how the dynamics have changed. And a lot of people really fell in love with the idea of working from home. And that forever changed the dynamic because once people had that, like Dennis had said, we really don't want to go back to that model. But there are certain instances where it is necessary for us to maybe not have someone come in every day into work, but create a hybrid approach in terms of the way that employees, can work and the ability to commute. How's that kind of changed today?
Well, I'd like to just start with the fact that this fight that's going on now against and for remote work, it's not actually new. It didn't really come from COVID. COVID just activated it a lot,
Mm,
like because
yeah.
so
very
many people,
true.
like nearly everyone, had to try it. But if you look past, like into companies like Hewlett Packard and like 30 years ago, even 40 years ago, it was already happening. And in our own company's experience, my co-founder, our CTO, has been working for Nokia at the time, like the golden
Mm,
years of Nokia, when they were like Apple today, where they were hiring best of the best from all over the world. They were doing remote work, allowing remote work at the time. The seating in the office was shared seating already back then. So, and companies like Google and others, of course, they are known to be doing that as well, to allow remote work and so on. So there's been this dialogue against and for it for a long time,
mm,
and it's something that I think will never really like settle. It will always be some opponents and proponents, but otherwise, so yeah, what's very special, what has happened definitely is because of this COVID, everybody had chance to try it, and it makes a lot of sense. Uh, like, of course, there are many reasons to be in office. Office is not going anywhere. It's definitely needed
mm.
for creating company culture, for making mending people together so that they can become a true team. So in-person contact will never be replaced by Zoom meetings or anything similar like that. You need to see face to face, but do you really need to be there every day? That's a big question.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think people realized. A lot of people realize that why, especially in those situations when you have to commute, when you have to really face a lot of inconvenience of going to the office. So, and on top of that, some professions like, let's say, developers who really need to think deep about what they're doing. I'm from developer community myself and our company, so I know this very well. Many people, and again, this was like from way before COVID. Many people hated the days when they had to go to office because they don't consider it to be real work.
Mm,
All those meetings, they think it's like it's not work. It's just like wasting time, sort of, or not very efficient, if it,
mm,
well spent time. So they look at it as something that that they're not working, and the only time when they are working is when they are at home, nobody disturbs them, they lock their door, and they can focus on writing some algorithms and thinking deep into some topic, and then they feel very productive. So there's a lot of professions, not just IT and developers, some other professions potentially as well, like some lawyers who need to think about some law, like in very much detail, or some writing some agreement, and many others, maybe even creative, like designers and stuff. They have to really focus to have this creative drive and not be distracted by
yeah.
coworkers who are jumping in and want to talk about weather and stuff like that. So it's many realize that, and it's become a much bigger trend. And so, of course, there is a pushback, but I think it's still a much bigger trend than it was before COVID. So it has spread a lot, and offices have had to adapt
Yeah, and I think
to
that,
this
I think
reality.
the big change too now is there's companies that are the hybrid model to me is the most logical, where you've got office space, but you have that flexibility to come and go as you need. The challenge that you run into, and this is where Vitaly's company plays into this, is that you may not know where everybody's at, or and especially if you're a controlling manager, that's a challenge for you. But also for teammates of who's going to be in the office what days and where they're going to be at, because in many cases you may not have a dedicated office like we used to, where we all
Mm.
came in and we all had our own cube or, office space. Now it may just be, you know, hoteling types of experiences
Yeah.
where you come and just kind of grab it for a day or two. The days of putting up all your pictures and all that stuff and personalizing it maybe is not as much now because you're there only 2 days a week. And then the days I'm not in, Benny's in. And so he uses the same space. So we share that. But I think, Vitali, talk about, what you guys do to help kind of with that challenge. Cause I think that's the biggest challenge of who's going to be in and where are they
Yeah.
at and what are we doing?
Yeah. So as a result of that, many people, practicing remote work. What happens to Office? Obviously, you have a lot of free seating. Like if Office hasn't reacted to this change, that means they have still dedicated desks, most of them, and people are not there. So it has a lot of effect. Of course, first effect is inefficient utilization of office space. Like it just because you have a lot of office and you usually want to keep it, so it becomes empty. In some cases of our customers, is like 20-30% occupied on average, which is quite crazy if you think about it, how much office
Mm.
costs in a nice area. So, but it's not just costs, it's also psychological effect. Like for those employees that are there, um, it's not even, they don't really get this office vibe if it's half empty or more empty than an office room. They feel like, oh, I shouldn't have come. Like why am I here? And when it's empty, so it's there's a lot of reasons. And finally, communication aspect. So we need something to replace what we used to. Like when everybody was in the office. So this is like, I think it's not coming back this time, at least not in the full way that it used to be, for sure. So we could just walk to each other and talk, water cooler situations and stuff, which are great experiences. But so now in this new reality, we need to have something, some technology layer to help sort of um, recreate that to some extent, or create this extra communication layer that will connect those like remote workers and workers in the office, so that they can know who is where in each given day, so they could plan their visits more efficiently. Like, let's say, just imagine you come to the office, you go through all the struggle of driving through traffic and going, making your hair, preparing your clothes, everything ever that comes to, in going to the office. And then none of your team who you need to meet are there. They're all remote. So, and you only found out when you came. What if what if you could change that so that every time you come to office, the right people are there? Isn't it amazing? You could actually be much more productive at whatever you need to do. So, and the bigger the
Yeah.
company, the more relevant it gets. Of course, it works even on a small
I
company
say
thing. Yeah,
even small ones. I mean, because you just never
yeah,
know who's going to be in or not. And it's like, it's your point.
yeah, yeah,
People will make the commute in and they get there and find out that the two or three people they need to meet with aren't coming
yeah,
in. And it's like, okay, if I had this tool that told me kind of, hey, who's planning on being in the next 2 or 3 days, then you
yeah, yeah,
could
yeah.
plan your activities accordingly. Because I may need to go in because I see Benny's going to be in, and we could do a call remotely, but being in person, we could be definitely much more productive.
Yeah.
Plus,
Our smallest customer is like five desks in an office, and they have like 10 plus people who are
yep,
using it. And they always know who's coming. But of course, it's like, or smaller, the smallest that it gets. Typical, maybe it's like 40 desks is like average size. So
yep,
like where there's a typical like office. And then many more people, potentially like a lot more people who
yeah,
are utilizing this. And of course, then the better, there's no limit on the size, how big
yeah.
it could get.
So Vitaly, your company's international, so you're dealing with this across the globe.
Mhm.
What do you see? Does every country have the same problem? Or are there some a little further advanced, some further behind? What are you seeing in the trends
Yeah,
that you're experiencing?
yeah. So we are indeed very international in more than 20 countries, and in let's say some areas of the world are more conservative. This mainly like Asia, and they are still often require like to micromanage employees and to force everybody to be in the office more and to see them, like I would say it's more like uh culture of like, you know um, it's part of the not just working culture but also like personal culture. Like the bosses need to prove to themselves that they're bosses, to show that by, you know expressing their power by overseeing employees and telling them that what to do, and just to be visible, to to so that's part of the, especially in Asia, that's what we observe. In
Interesting.
in Europe, especially like Northern Europe, this is much less of an issue. They're much more like liberal in that aspect. They're much more like well, I mean, in a way that they are trying new ways much quicker, and they adopt new things. There's also a very low power distance, so there's like a flat organizational structure. So it's very common in Northern Europe in particular, and there it's just basically they are trusting employees more, and that helps to drive this remote work because there is a higher trust level, so that they will do their job when they're at home and not under supervision. And of course, then in the US in particular, I would say that something in between, because it has both like uh, factors. Like some companies are still very conservative, and some are much more liberal and like progressive, and they want to try new things, And and then most companies are somewhere in between. That's why we see such a distribution of different policies. Like in some cases, they consider it to be flexible. If they force you to be in office, let's say 3 days per week, and they already think it's flexible, like, and you can do it remote 2 days. But
Yeah.
in my case, I think it's not very flexible still. And then, of course, the most flexible cases are like when they just tell, okay, you can come to office as often as you like, or not come to office, as long as you do your job well and we're happy with your performance. You choose where to work from. I think that's the best case scenario. But of course, it is not all companies.
Yeah.
Still, very few companies who have this kind of full flexibility. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there is some companies, like some of our customers are large enterprise American customers, which are present in many continents and many countries. For example, they have, just specific example, like if you come to office, like you can, they have flexibility, but if you come to office at least 3 times per week, you're entitled to have a fixed desk. So you could have your own spot, and it will be always dedicated to
Okay.
you. If
That's a
you
good
come on,
idea. That's a good one.
yeah,
I mean, because if
yeah,
you're coming 3 days,
yeah.
if you're
And
only
in
going to come
fact,
in one or two, you need to do the hoteling, which makes sense.
yeah, and in fact, our system allows that kind of, they can grant permission to those people. They can even fish out the data, how many times per week on average this specific person has been coming to the office. You can see it from the access logs. And then they will say, okay, these people who have reached this threshold, they are given this privilege to have a fixed desk. And they can actually do it themselves. Not even HR need to like assign those desks.
So
The people
it's like
can,
a shopping program. It's like a so
yeah,
if like when you go to Chick-fil-A, you get points. So if you show up, you
yeah,
get points, and if you get
something
points,
like that.
you're in a workspace. There you
Sort
go.
of
Make it fun.
gamified access, the gamified privilege. But then you can sort of book any free desk permanently, and it stays yours. And then, on addition to that, you can also change it later. Let's say you decided to sit on a different floor in different department. You can also change your fixed desk without HR like having to do anything, because you can just change it, and then the previous desk gets released.
Yeah.
So we can
Cool.
even do that, or then you can, on top of that, just book some desks just for this one specific day. So
Perfect.
yeah,
Awesome.
just in some.
So
That's cool. That's
let me let
powerful.
me let me ask Vitaly, because yeah, as you and Dennis were talking, I'm just kind of thinking through this. The it seems like what's the end result we're seeing? Are we seeing increased productivity, the ability to really manage the office space, right? Dennis and I, we were talking about this story when he came out here and visited me in Denver, and one of the partners that he works with had this humongous office that they had rented, and it literally was like, I don't know, Dennis was like 10 or 20% occupied, or like
Yeah.
very, it was cavernous. And so it seems to me like this type of solution, and I think as a business owner, business driver, that I would be able to really uh, uh, determine what type of floor plan I need. I would, instead of me maybe having 20,000 square feet, maybe it's 10,000 square feet, maybe it's even smaller than that.
Yeah.
Are you seeing gains like that, being able to use your solution?
Yes, exactly. That's what we're seeing. Some customers, let's say, they often don't cut as aggressively as they could, just because often they want to keep this office still available for everybody, even once a year only together, all
Uh-huh.
together, because it's sometimes hard to get such very nice locations back. But then that's another thing, by the way, with systems like what we can make happen, we can even allow you to share part of your office, and not with anyone, but let's say with your trusted partner, who is like your neighbor. and you can then minimize the cost without giving up the office. It's possible. But then, of course, yeah, we have some customers. Let's say one customer that had 7 floors of office, and they noticed from using DeskMe system that okay, they have very low utilization, and they just modestly given up 1 floor, and they are saving like 50,000
Yeah.
per US dollars per month for because of that.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
one example. It is definitely happening. Yes.
Well, and Benny, I think the other thing too is that historically, many of the offices were offices and cubes and not as much meeting space. Vitaly, we were talking about this before we started recording.
Mm,
Now it's you may still keep the same space, but you bring in an interior design team to help redesign the whole floor plan so
Yep.
that instead of 60% office space, maybe it's 30% office space, but the 70% turns into different types of meeting rooms because now you're going to need to have that hoteling space. You're going to need to have that space where someone can go in and do a phone call because in the past they may have gone into a conference room that was for 20, 30 people to make a phone call. Well, that was probably
Yeah.
not the best use of that space.
yeah.
So it's like, okay, how can you reconfigure and make it more useful? And then with Vitaly's tool, how do you even make
Mhm.
it even more productive? And you may have it where, to your point, Vitaly, you may have another company on the floor and you share the spaces and make it even more robust and bigger for meetings and all that kind of stuff because you're not competing with them. You're just using the space more effectively. And I'm in Atlanta now, and I mean, I was reading yesterday the downtown market of Atlanta. I think they said is about 40% vacant. Well, it's not that
Mhm.
people have left per se. It's the fact that people are remote, and so where they used to take a whole building, now maybe they only take a third of the building, and that and
Right.
people aren't backfilling those spaces like they used to because people want the more remote experience. They probably want more of a campus environment type of feel. They want all the amenities. They don't need just a building that had cubes and office space. And
Well,
that's a challenge.
I'm curious, Vitaly, would you mind maybe kind of showing us, maybe
Yes.
how it would work? I'm curious about this. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We'll be glad to. So actually, I will show you some to address your questions about the the floor plan and layout. So what you can now look at, what you see now is a DeskMe interface. So DeskMe is our company name, and so we can make your office look like this in an app that you can just open in a second on your phone, and you see your floors floor by floor just like this, and then you make a booking for either a desk or meeting room in just a few taps and like max 5 seconds interaction, and you close it and you back to your other business. So we aim to minimize your interaction with the system so that you don't even have to think. But about the floor plan question, so yeah, we visualize floor plan, and that's why we know what's happening in layouts, office layouts, and there's definitely distinctive changes happening. So the number of desks is reduced because of even as companies hiring more people, they could still reduce number of desks because of this remote work and switch to shared desks. Often also we notice that companies are making offices more fancy. So they want to attract people to come to office more often. So
hmm
they're actually investing more into making office more comfortable. They include a lot of like free stuff that you could have by coming to the office, and many some free food, some free snacks, free ice cream, free everything.
hmm
And of course also there's more distance between desks, so like fancier furniture. Sometimes it's the same area but fewer desks, so but more comfortable desks as well. And so fewer desks, like sometimes we see like decrease of like 60%, like or half. It really
So
varies, of
Vitaly,
course,
as
from
I'm looking
company.
at your tool here, so I'm assuming the green tells me those spaces are available to reserve.
Hmm.
Yellow tells me who's in, correct? And who
Yep.
already has that space reserved. And I'm assuming
Hmm.
with your software, I could put in Benny's name and I can see, hey, he's planning to come in, Wednesday,
Exactly.
Thursday,
Actually,
and Friday this week.
if we are asking not just the decision makers at companies, but the users who use it every day, we ask them, well, what do they like most about this system? They will say, oh, I like to search for my colleagues and see who is where coming in. Because then it can tell you, if you search by names, Dennis, you say, okay, he's not in office today, but he's coming next Thursday. and see, okay, and you can see where exactly Dennis will be sitting next Thursday. So you can say, okay, I will also come next Thursday and I will sit right next to it or nearest available desk.
Yeah.
And I could have the productive time. That people, sometimes they use it the opposite way. They want to avoid someone and they search for
Who's coming
someone.
in? I'm going the other floor.
Exactly, exactly. But they really appreciate this because even in some companies, even with like most desks, because even dedicated desks, they can still mark them in our system, and
Mm,
Yeah.
and you can see who is sitting where on a permanent basis. It's also valuable information to find those people because it changes over time, and usually it's like HR extra job to keep it up to date and to inform everybody. But this way, it can self update and so on. And
But I'm
another thing I
assuming,
wanted to add, yeah.
Vitaly, I'm assuming too, like, let's say I got a team and I want to come in. And so I grab desk 11 and everybody else grabs there. And then we
Mhm.
could reserve that meeting room there and another meeting room for our breakouts. And so we know that, hey, we've got these things reserved. Here's what we're going to be doing. We're in close proximity to each other. We ought to be much more productive and knock this stuff out. And so I can see that, hey, we're going to be here on Wednesday and Thursday and knock this stuff out with Benny and you and I.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is really cool. This is very powerful.
but that's exactly how it works. Last comment I want to make is about the meeting room. As you can see, meeting rooms are also on this view,
mm,
space view. And this is very important because if somebody is not at their desk, there might be at the meeting room, and this system will show, oh, okay, this person is booked for from 3 to 4 in the meeting room right there. So you know when not to expect them to see them at their desk. And also, like we don't replace booking system like usually companies use either Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, like Outlook. So one of those two, like 95% cases. And we don't replace that because it works so well. We integrate so that all your bookings that you make from Outlook
yeah,
or from Google Calendar are automatically visible here. Or if you choose to book them from DeskMe interface, they will automatically make it to the Outlook or Google. And then it basically keeps it informed. I haven't even talked about our hardware, meeting room
Yeah.
screens, and other devices, sensors, and stuff that we can enhance. But
But
anyway, this works together as a one
so Vital,
information.
so Vitaly,
Mhm,
that's an important part of what you just
mhm.
said. So the fact that I don't have to do it in Google and here, I can do it here, and it's going to go to my Google Calendar and all that stuff.
Yeah,
That's a really powerful thing because a lot of times, a lot of software I've seen in the past, you did it here, but then you still had to go do the calendars and all that other kind of
yeah,
stuff. And that it's like, okay, now I'm doing extra work. This doesn't feel productive. This is pretty
yeah,
cool. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I encourage our listeners, if you're listening, log in and watch this because this is pretty cool how this thing works and stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
So yeah, I very much appreciate everybody's attention, and we had a special actually offer for the listeners of this podcast. So if you go to our website desme.com and sign up, and in a message you mention the podcast that you learn about Desme in the podcast, you will get 6 months free of Desme service. So and there is
Hmm,
no startup cost. You can just experience it without extra cost without any cost on a software level for half a year. That's we haven't actually
that
made such offer before, so it's very special.
wow.
that's a great offer. I mean, seriously, because I mean, this is powerful. And that gives you because a lot of times people will say, "Hey, you get 2 weeks. You can't experience something like this in 2 weeks. 6 months though gives you learn the power of this thing. You start seeing the value. So,
Yeah,
this is
it's,
awesome. Benny, anything
yeah.
else you want to ask?
No, I think this is such an impressive system, and I think for those companies, and Dennis, it kind of brings me back to the time a couple decades ago when I first met you. And you were in charge of this gigantic
Yep.
building, and for those who don't know, Dennis and I have a history because Dennis was my client a couple decades ago, and part of his role and responsibility was he was in charge of this gigantic building over in Nashville, and to me, it was overwhelming, but Dennis was able to handle it. I think something like this probably would have helped you quite a
It would
bit.
have made life even so much better because we had moved to an open floor plan, and so
Mm,
people they had their dedicated spaces, but we switched from offices to tons of meeting rooms.
yeah,
And we had a tool that you could reserve the meeting rooms, but you didn't know who was in the meeting. So that was always, but this would have been so much more powerful. And
yeah,
because we had 400,000 square feet. So it was a lot. And I mean,
it's
people were
big,
scattered all, and you would
beautiful,
spend
yeah,
not hours, but a lot of time walking around trying to find people because they a lot of times wouldn't be at their desk because they needed to have a call somewhere. And if you knew where they were at, would have been so much more productive and helpful. So
yeah,
I can speak to those that are in buildings, that need to know where people are at, I would encourage you to reach out to Vitaly and his offer of six
Yeah,
free months. That's powerful.
that's pretty
So
amazing. Yeah,
I hope Vitaly, I hope you get some listeners calling in or
yeah.
reaching you at deskme.com.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Vitaly, thanks for coming on on the podcast today. Best way for people to get a hold of you, is it at deskme.com?
Yes. Also, you could reach me by email, Vitaly@desme.com directly. I will answer any requests. Uh, we will help you start it, and actually can just give you a consultation call as well, just to check your situation and what's more relevant for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Vitaly,
think it's
again, thanks so much. Listeners, Vitaly's the CEO of DeskMe. So you've got the head person there. So reach
they
out to
got the
him.
top.
Give them a holler because I think they've got a great tool. I think you'll find it valuable and make your team much more productive.
Thanks for stopping by today, Vitaly.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, well, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Looking forward for watching your podcast. By the way,
Sounds
Well, thank
good.
you.
always. Yeah.
Right.
Have a good one.
You've been listening to WFH with two guys. We'll see you next time.